Hello everyone! So we're back again to our last video or video 5 of our journey in my subject genetics. First and foremost, gusto ko po magpasalamat dahil sinamahan niyo po ako in my 4 videos. In our last video, samahan niyo po ulit ako na hanggang matapos po ito. And ako po excited na. Kayo po ba excited na? Yan po. And this morning, we will tackle about the Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance. So first, let's just tackle what is heredity. It is the passing of traits from parent to offspring. That is heredity. And the traits, it is characterized that are in characteristics that are inherited, like hair color, height, blood type, susceptibility to a certain disease like diabetes, depression, obesity, breast cancer. That are traits. And lastly, our subject matter, we call it genetics. It is the study of heredity. It is the study of passing of traits from parent to offspring. Okay? So, that meaning will give us the main idea of our topic. To our next slide, let's just tackle who is this man, Gregor Mendel. He is an Austrian monk who formulated fundamental laws of heredity in early 1860s. He also studied science and mathematics at University of Vienna. He conducted breeding experiments with the garden of Pisum sativum. Or he also gathered and documented mathematical data from his experiments. This is Gregor Mendel. Kung natatanong niyo po, he's also a scientist. Okay po. So, kaya po siya nag-formulate in everything about math or science. Okay po. Or making experiments. He's also a scientist. Furthermore, let's talk about the Mendel's experiments about the garden pea. What's all about garden pea, kuya? Sabi ni Gregor Mendel, ito po ay easy to cultivate and it's short generation time. It's also cross-pollination by hand. Ayan po, the sample and picture of garden pea. Okay po. Yan. Next is his experiments. Yan. The first column or row is about trait and also the characteristics if it is dominant or recessive, and also the results of the experiments. Kailangan po ng results kapag nagkakaroon po ng experiments. Like what Mendel's do in his experiment. Yan po. If you will see the picture, yung pagkakaiba po ng dominant at recessive in terms of, I think it's food or vegetables or fruits or flowers. Yan po. And self-pollination, it involves having the pollen or the male sperm be directly deposited on the female section of the flower. That is self-pollination. And in cross-pollination, it requires the removal of the male stamen makes pollen on first flower and transferring the pollen from a different flower to the first one. Okay? Yan po yung cross-pollination. And also, the blending inheritance. Prior to Mendel, most breeders believed parents of contrasting appearance always produce offspring of intermediate appearance. Okay? It states also no knowledge of cells or chromosomes. It also states here, based on the idea of that offspring have traits of both parents. Yan po. and reappearance of traits attributed to genetic instability. That is blending inheritance. So, we will focus on the experiments. He studied mathematical trends in breeding patterns. Tinignan po niya yung simple discrete traits. And Mendel's experiments help him formulate the particulate theory of inheritance. Like inheritance involving reshuffling of genes from generation to generation. Yan po, nakakabilib po si Mendel. And one trait of inheritance, his experiment, Mendel performed crossbreeding experiments between true breeding plants. Ibig sabihin po yan is yung normal plant. Okay po. The true breeding parents with a certain trait consistently pass the trait to every offspring or the homozygous. Okay po. Choose varieties that differed in only one trait or monohybrid cross. Ayan po. So that's one trait inheritance. Yan po yung result ng Mendel cross of true breeding short with a true breeding tall pea plant. Kung nakita po natin, pinagsama po niya yung short pea at yung tall pea sa iisa, and the result of it is tall pa rin po. Okay po? Nagki-create po siya ng mas marami sa tall kaysa sa short. Okay po. Yan po. Kung titignan po natin, 3 po yung result or 4 po yung result, and yung 3 po doon is yung malaki. At yung isa naman po ay product po niya is maliit. Ayan po. That's the result of Mendel's cross of true breeding sa plants. Pea plant po. Also, Mendel saw the same results in different traits. Ito na po yun. Nagkaroon po siya ng idea about that. Una po, tinignan niya lang po yung about short and tall. But in some ways, nagkaroon po ng idea in colors. Yan po. Tinignan po niya yung generation ng color between flowers. This is the purple flowers and the white flowers. And all plants had purple flowers. Exactly. But it also has white flower in its production. Pero hindi po karamihan. Ito po ay onti lamang. Hindi po tulad ng purple flowers na ito po ay true breeding. Okay po. One trait inheritance perform reciprocal crosses. Individuals pollinate one another. That's the parental generation. First generation of offspring. Second generation offspring. That's F1, F2. Formulated law of segregation. Kuya, ano nga ba yung law of segregation? Hindi ko po alam yun eh. Ito po ang law of segregation. Each individual has 2 factors for each trait. The factors segregate during gamete formation. Each gamete contains only one factor from each pair of factors. Fertilization gives each new individual 2 factors for each trait. That is law of segregation. Hinihiwalay po niya. Ayan po ang example. The parent generation, the first generation, and also the second generation. Kung titignan po natin, in parent generation, red pa po yung product. Okay po. But in first generation, ayan po. At sa second generation, may pagkakaiba na po. Nakikita po natin sa picture. Let's go to alleles on homologous chromosomes. These alternative forms of a gene that code for a trait are called alleles. There are 2 alleles for each trait. one allele for a trait is from mom and one allele is from dad. That's it. And po. And the principle of dominance, dominant allele, it is a capital. Okay po. Letter. Masks that expression of the recessive allele or the lower case. Alleles occur on a homologous pair of chromosomes at a particular gene locus. Gene locus wherein the location of gene on the chromosome. Okay po. That's the principle of dominance. Let us tackle about the difference of genotype and phenotype. Genotype refers to the alleles an individual receives at fertilization. If alleles are identical, genotype is homozygous. If alleles are different, genotype is heterozygous. Okay po, tandaan po natin yan maigi. And phenotype refers to the physical appearance of the individual. Okay po. Let us go to Punnett square. What is Punnett square, kuya? All possible genotypes are of sperm are lined up on one axis and all possible genotypes eggs lined up on the other axis. That is the Punnett square. It is very possible combination of alleles like zygote genotypes placed within squares. Ayan po. And the test cross, a monohybrid test cross is used to determine if an individual with a dominant phenotype is homozygous dominant or heterozygous for a particular trait. Individuals with recessive phenotype always have the homozygous recessive genotype. However, individuals with dominant phenotype have indeterminate genotype, may be homozygous dominant or heterozygous. Okay po. The sample of test cross is this. Yan po ang sample ng test cross po natin. Okay po. The dihybrid cross. Ayan po ang ating dihybrid cross. And the two-trait test cross is used to determine if an individual is homozygous dominant or heterozygous for either of the two traits. That is two-trait test cross. And let us go to law of independence assortment. Pairs of alleles for different traits separate independently of one another during gamete formation, or what we call meiosis. In other words, the inheritance of one trait has no influence on the inheritance of another trait. Wala pong influence, okay po, ng ibang trait po. Yan po ang law of independent assortment. Okay po. Let's go to non-Mendelian genetics. First na tinapik po natin is all about the Mendelian genetics, his experiments, his observation about the pea plant, and other about genetics. Okay po. Furthermore, Mendelian genetics, it is a complete dominance po. Only two possible phenotypes, either dominant or recessive, or tall plant and short plant equals to tall plant. That is the Mendelian genetics or complete dominance. Okay po. Yan lang po ay summary ng ating Mendelian genetics or inheritance. But in non-Mendelian genetics, not all inheritance is based on the rules of complete dominance. Why? The sample picture reminds of this. magkakaiba po ang function, magkakaiba po ang products, and some ways may effect po ang bawat bagay. Yan po. And the fruits. In Mendelian genetics describes inheritance patterns based on complete dominance or recessiveness. There are other types of inheritance that Mendel never considered. What 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 are these? This is these are the incomplete inheritance, codominance, multiple alleles, polygenic traits, or sex-linked. These are the non-Mendelian genetics. The incomplete inheritance, the hybrid heterozygous offspring displays a third phenotype. Neither trait is completely dominant. As a result, there appears to be a blending phenotype. Like example, the red flower combined to white flower, and its product is pink. Ding ding. An incomplete inheritance problem. What is the probability of pink flowers if pink flowers are bred with red flowers? Ito po ang magiging solusyon or product po niyan. Maghahalo po sila. Also, yan po, na 50% 50% of each cell will combine. Hindi po siya complete dominant style. Ayan po. And in codominance, both traits are dominant and show up in phenotype together. Co means together. Okay, combined. Okay po. Like the example of black cow and white cow. The product of this is spotted cow. Ayan po. Kung nakikita po natin sa picture or in our PowerPoint. Ang problema naman po sa codominance, what are all possible phenotypes when two spotted cows are bred? Ayan. Minsan, nagiging white lahat. Minsan, nagiging black din. Possible phenotypes are a black cow, two spotted cows, and a white cow. Ayan po. Minsan, naghahalo po talaga at minsan, white po siya ng buo, minsan, black din po siya ng buo. Okay? Below are imaginary organisms. Note, horn shape, leg length, fur color, and tail shape. Now, determine the type of inheritance of the four traits by examining the genotypes of the parents of offspring. Yan. Tignan po natin maigi. Sa simple horn, short legs po siya. Yung isa po dito in our left area. The animal with simple horn, short legs, yellow fur, and short tail. While in the right hand, the branch horn, or mas malaki, long legs, brown fur, and corkscrew tail. Yan po. Combined together, yan po, strip fur or curled tail. Minsan, nagkakaiba na lang po kung malaki po sila or maliit. Okay po. That's the examination or the experiment situation. Okay po. Blood type displays both codominance and complete dominance. Why? Red blood cells can either have a carbohydrate on their surface or not. The presence of carbohydrate is dominant to the absence of carbo or of a carb. Additionally, there are two types of carbs that may exist on the surface of RBCs called A and B. Cell surface carbs A and B are codominant, which means they could also show up at the same time on an RBC. Okay po. Blood type inheritance rules. Number 1, a person with an allele will have A carbohydrates. A person with Number 2, a person with the 1B allele will have B carbohydrates. Number 3, a person with the recessive I allele will have no carbohydrates. Number 4, or a person with both 1A and 1B alleles will have both A and B carbohydrates on their cell. Examples are in the pictures, the cell, genotype, and blood types. Yan po, pagkakaiba po ng bawat cells. Let's go to multiple alleles. When more than two varieties exist in a trait, when many animals have a variety of coat colors. That is multiple alleles. Kung titignan po natin, minsan hindi po siya nagtutugma kung sino, hindi po natin alam kung sino po yung nanay at tatay niya, ganyan. Kasi ito po ay ang multiple alleles, or it has two varieties exist in a trait. Okay po. And in polygenic traits, it requires more than one gene allele to determine trait. Like the example, the skin tone is determined by 4 to 6 genes. That means that there may be 6 different chromosomes involved. Yan, makikita po natin. Let's also talk about sex-linked inheritance. Genes for some traits are found on the sex chromosomes, or tinatawag nating X or Y. Most of these traits are recessive. The normal gene is dominant. Heterozygous females are carriers. They do not show the trait but carry a gene for the trait. Homozygous females have the trait. Males with the gene XCY have the trait. They do not have another X to counterbalance the affected gene. That is the sex inherited, or the sex-linked inheritance rather. The color blindness is a sex-linked recessive trait. The gene for this trait is inherited through the X chromosomes. If a woman with normal vision has children with a man who is colorblind, what are the chances that their children will be colorblind? Will any children be carriers of the trait? It may be. That's it. Yes. Yan po. Maybe po ay namana po ito ng ninunuhan po natin. And I'm now here to my last area of my video. And gusto ko po magpasalamat sa lahat po ng tumulong at sumama po sa akin sa aking journey in doing my laboratory. Laboratory 1 is all about cell. Laboratory 2 is mitosis, meiosis. Laboratory 3 is all about transition transcription. laboratory 4 is all about the gene regulation and mutation. And now is the laboratory 5. It's all about the Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance. And sana po ay natuto po kayo sa aking mga ginawa na PowerPoint, and some is for my thoughts, and hindi ko na po patatagalin dahil hanggang dito na lamang po, at maraming salamat po ulit sa inyo, and God bless po.